What do you think about that? That is one thing that I haven't 100% bought in with Alex Hormozi is his death tax idea. What do you think about that? I'm curious because I'm not sure. I can make a case for both sides of it being a good idea and a bad idea, but I've never asked anyone else. Yeah, what do you think, Jake?
I like the idea because I think a lot more people will kind of spread their wealth into more nonprofits and charities and stuff that kind of helps other people and not accumulate it. Because Andrew Tate says this as well, is when you grow up with a lot of money, because I definitely, I grew up with a single mother. She had to work 3 jobs, barely had food on the table. We lived in like this very, very small, like 12 square foot apartment, barely had any like heating. So I didn't grow up with any money. And I think as a man, you kind of need that hardship and that trauma and that learning and building the skills of like getting money and getting a job and getting a good interview and then building a business and kind of making something of yourself. But then when you're born with money, you don't have that. So I think, and you have to become productive to society, because if you're not productive, you're either a scammer or you're just robbing people of their money, like physically. So you have to learn how to become productive, a productive member of society, and I think it's good for everybody. So I actually supported that tax. I think it's a good idea.
Go ahead, Max. What
are your ideas? So the death tax is an interesting thing to me. One of my thoughts why I would not be for it is in general, and I think there's nuance to things like that. But one is, I think a huge motivation for a lot of people is the ability to protect their family. And that extends after they die. And I do feel that there is a subset of people that for good reason are pursuing more money. And it's a motivating factor to potentially leave that to their kids and make sure that their family is protected. And if you take enough tax away and you take away the ability for them to leave something to their offspring, you take away a motivational factor to one of the reasons I think that even is, ethically, potentially moral, of taking responsibility for their family and creating generational wealth. If you take that away, you take away I think a good motivational factor to do things. And I don't know, like I understand the other side too of, your money's gone when you're dead. Let's try to spend it before we're dead. We're not going to be here. But I think there is something too about how meaning can the actions you take now, the fact that you can leave an impact on the world after you're dead is a really cool potential meaning for people. And I know for me, like one of the reasons that I want to master the ability to provide value, which means I have to know what's valuable, and the ability to handle money well, which money is not the end. Like you guys are saying, you need to I think enough people with a lot of money have found that money doesn't fully satisfy. Money is a means, and there's more valuable things than money. But for me, the money game becomes more valuable to me, and there's a reason I want to pursue money, because I can learn life lessons, and that's very meaningful to me because I want to be a good friend and I want to be able to teach my children. And if I haven't understood what is actually meaningful and haven't played and pushed myself in the game, then I feel like I can't do those things. And I want to pass on that understanding in a way that will continue after I'm dead. And it honestly reminds me of another quote. I don't know who it's by, but it says, every man should plant a tree, write a book, and have a son, because all of those things live on after you're dead. And that's one of the motivating factors for me with my YouTube channel is the lessons that I'm learning. I understand that I am still learning this game, that I don't have it all figured out, but I'm trying to be transparent and authentic in my process. And I also want to get better at it, at like articulating and sharing this idea, because I want to have, it's kind of the equivalent of a book, I guess, in that scenario. I want to have something that exists after I'm gone. And if I can learn and become better at this, then what I'm sharing in the process hopefully will the fact that this would help the world be better is even more reason for me to strive harder. And if I died tomorrow, I would like to think that this thing is going to exist after I live. And it all kind of relates back a little bit to the death tax. If you stop some of that ability to live on after you're dead, then you take some of the meaning out of pursuing it, which I don't know everyone thinks about it that way. And that's something I know Alex doesn't have kids. And I don't know if that's why he's kind of not necessarily thinking of that particular picture. But that would be a different take on that, I guess, from me.
Yeah, I think Alex, he famously talks about he doesn't want kids, or he doesn't have them because maybe will at some point in his life, but at least right now his mindset is focused on building business, being a billionaire, all that. So that may shape a lot of his ideals too. I guess I would look at the death tax as more aspirational than, I don't think, at least in America, in our lifetimes, I don't think it would ever happen. But I also think about being aspirational, it helping people reason about, hey, if you have billions of dollars and you haven't started a foundation, you haven't did something that is not going to just let your offspring and your family just hold on to it, and you're just putting it in their hands and you're trusting them. Maybe they're experts in charity, maybe they're experts in developing the world, maybe they're super smart, or maybe they're not, none of those things. But maybe, I guess what an alternative could be, maybe there's heavy incentives around, hey, if you don't have a foundation, like maybe encouraging people to have some sort of foundation, build some sort of business to put it in, just any reason not to have just a huge accumulation of wealth in generations that it's not being productive in the world. And so I say this as a libertarian too, like I'm very suspicious of any laws and taxes and all those things, but I also think about the philosophy around the living and motivation and building and capitalism.
I agree.
I think about, I think all those things that come together, I could see some sort of maybe incentive system in the future where, hey, you don't have to do this. There's not a death tax, but you are incentivized to put that money to work. I think that could be some sort of compromise and maybe good on both sides.
Another thing that I'm thinking of is trust fund babies do not have a good reputation. And kind of like I think you guys have already said, like, I think sounds like all of us didn't grow up wealthy. And one of the drives for me to figure out this life thing was because I knew if I didn't, I have nothing to fall back on. And like, that's one thing I do think about. Like, I'm thankful for everyone has a hard childhood, but like a harder childhood where I actually had to work. And I had, relative to the average person, quite high expectations. But part of it for me was also, there was a need. Like, I grew up on a farm, and it's like, when I was 8 years old, I had a lunchbox behind me so I could reach the pedals, driving stuff around. And it was like, I wasn't doing it for money even. It was like the family needs this to happen. And it made me not have the mentality of this isn't fair. It was like, well, my dad's working harder than I am, and I'm here to help, basically. And that's one of the thoughts I do think about. If my kids are raised in a different environment, I don't want a trust fund kid. That will rot the kid. And I think there is another aspect to this whole thing that is a little bit more maybe nuanced or something to it. I think there's the good of being able to protect those that you care about after you're dead, but a part of taking care of them isn't spoiling them or ruining their motivation to actually try hard and bring good to the world at the same time. And you're reminding me of what I do think about with my own kids, and how, I don't need them to, get a shovel or whatever the hard things that I grew up with, that circumstance and that need isn't necessarily here. How do I teach them the same values that I was able to learn from? Anyway, you're reminding me of the other side to some of this.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think anyone with kids who grows up this way and has, or is conscious about not wanting to spoil them and not wanting to make them have these motivations to become ambitious and a person who wants to, not self-reliance. I think self-reliance is a huge principle that I would do near and dear to my heart as well. But how do you do that with kids, for example? And it doesn't happen. Yeah, I think we're all still figuring that out, I think.
I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about this because I don't have kids yet. But I'm one of these weirdos where I want to have a bunch of damn kids. I want to have a little army of little Jakes. like 30 jakes,
Nice.
conquering the world. I'm in that mindset. And
Nice.
it's interesting, right? Because when you accumulate a lot of money, then how do you give it to your kids without rotting them? And then when you look at it from like a business kind of perspective, is certain, okay, this is kind of taking systems thinking and putting it into kids. There's like a discussion to be had there. But when it comes to business, like there's certain clients that come in and they have certain activation points in their client journey that make them a good client and get good results. So when I kind of reverse engineered my life, or how I kind of got to this point, one was learning how to code. The other one was learning how to fight, then learning how to think, reading a bunch of books, going to masterminds, going to conferences, all of these kind of things. If you're in environments with a bunch of smart people who have ambitious goals, it kind of through osmosis becomes part of you. And especially in the fighting world, because it's so visceral. And I was thinking about this, right? So you could make a list of all of the books that you read and all of the things that you did. And then you can kind of put like whatever kind of fun together. And then you can kind of track your kid. This is going to sound funny. Bear with me.
Yeah.
So you can have a fund where they kind of unlock certain amounts of money based on the person they become. And then you can have like benchmarks and stuff like that. Okay, if you read all of these books and make summaries and then you show you actually implement them, or you go to training like 3 times a week and you can actually show it. Then after a certain amount of years, when you're 18, you unlock this amount of money. And then the more of these milestones you kind of complete and show how good of a person you become, you unlock more and more money out of the trust fund. And then if you don't do that, the trust fund money either goes to like a charity or whatever, but you unlock the amount of money based on the caliber of person you've become, based on the achievements you've done up until the age of 18 or 21. And then they can choose to not do it. And you can approach it from a way of like, hey, this is available to you. I had to work very hard to become this person to achieve this amount of like money. So I would want you to see you become like a person worthy of this amount of money. And if you don't want to do that, that is totally cool as well. That is up to you to decide. But if you do want to become that person that would have that kind of money, you're not going to get the money until you become the person. And I kind of want to implement some of that for my kids. Girls are a little bit different, but especially for like sons, 100%. I think that's a great way to approach it. But then if you push it onto them, they'll push it off. But if you're just like, hey, it's there for you. If you become the person, you deserve it, then you're going to get it. But if you don't, hey, then you don't. That's life.
I like that, Jake.
Yeah, I thought about this quite a bit.
No, I haven't thought about the systematizing it, but yeah, that makes sense, of course, from, I think what you were maybe concerned with too, is like, how do you do it in a family oriented way where you don't feel like, hey, the family is a business, this is a family, but also there are milestones and there's a system that you need to play in. So like, how do you strike that balance? I think that would be the key part in it, where it doesn't, get awkward. But no, man, that's a great way of looking at it. If you can pull that off, hey, that's incentive reward system, right? And you're making sure that you don't spoil them and they earn it. So I don't see anything wrong with that.